I greet you here at THEKI, your podcast for consciousness, health, and happiness. I'm Sandra, and today we're talking about soul migration, home planets, earth souls, and star seeds. Yes, I've been asked many times to please do something on this topic, and I know you hear a lot about it, unfortunately a lot of nonsense too, but that also has its place in our world. I've always been a bit reluctant to make these categories and distinctions because they don't really exist. But to hopefully bring a bit of clarity to it, for you, I'd like to break it down for you today as I perceive and experience it. And I just hope that it also helps you out there to recognize the unity and perfection in this diversity, because that's what it's all about. So the source as the be-all and end-all, that is our fixed point. We are all from the source and we return to it as well. Actually, even that is part of an illusion, because in truth, we are never separated from the source. We are always part of it. We are always part of the big picture, part of this pure consciousness that experiences itself through us in infinite perfection and diversity. And this quote from Thomas Aquinas fits well. God has neither beginning nor end. He possesses his whole being at once, in which the concept of eternity rests. Yes, we are eternal beings. And so we choose on our journey through eons, sometimes very different paths. In my book, Involution, I explain many things that I can only touch on here, because it would otherwise go beyond the scope. If you want to know more about it, think of the book. As we, as beings of pure consciousness, continue to condense into countless levels, we have completely unique experiences that then invite us into new worlds and levels of experience. And so there is, so to speak, a home planet. That means at some point we decided to incarnate on a planet in a body. And the first planet on which we did that is usually perceived as the home planet. And it often stays that way forever. Perhaps many incarnations simply took place on one planet so that a sense of home simply arose. Maybe it was only a few, but very intense ones. In any case, in connection with this planet, we experience such a very special feeling, a feeling of home. It can also be a certain kind of longing. And the constellation we're incarnated in on Earth now often relates to this planet or planetary system. So there are no coincidences at all. It's perfection down to the smallest detail. There are certain places on Earth that are, for example, directly connected to specific planetary systems. And it's no coincidence if you feel particularly comfortable or familiar in these places, because they naturally carry the energy of the planetary system to some extent. And you feel that if you're familiar with it. And of course, other soulmates are then incarnated with us in the same place and often feel this unconsciously as well. Yes, you can surely, with me introducing it like this, you can probably already imagine that there are very, very many possible worlds and levels of experience. Therefore, I won't give so many examples at this point, but I would like to mention a few of them to you. Namely, first, the experience of ascension with other planets, because that may have moved or enabled you to incarnate here now. Maybe even as a helper soul. There's a separate podcast about that. As a helper soul who knows this process and can now consciously participate. And I want to tell you something about the home planet Earth and how the experiences of Earth souls and star souls differ here. So, number one, your soul has already had the experience of ascension. It's not uncommon for planets to cyclically move into different dimensions. Just as we here on Earth move in a 26,000-year cycle, there are similar cycles for other planets and solar systems too. And if you've experienced such a process before, then you know it deep down inside you. Of course, it's always unique and largely dependent on the inhabitants, but ultimately everything is vibration. And if your soul has already witnessed how such a change takes place, what can happen during it, materially with natural disasters and upheavals, but also spiritually, then you know that. and then you don't let yourself be unsettled so easily when it happens here again. Now, so you just feel it then, you know intuitively that everything is going in the right direction, and you can then be a lighthouse for others who are afraid. And if you bring this knowledge with you, then you also understand that consciousness is gradually being raised, and you can bear the fact that many are still asleep, meaning they're simply still veiled in their consciousness. Yes, you can even be among those who can then clearly help, for example, professionally, or through specific messages for people, also through seminars, through treatments, whatever it may be. Or even in a very personal way, by simply keeping the vibration high and holding the field. And thereby also enabling others to develop themselves and to hold their own field. Above all, what's really a big advantage is if you've already made the acquaintance of the Asuras and their fear matrix at some point, then you have a huge advantage. No one can fool you. You can't be manipulated, even if it's difficult sometimes. But playing along and letting yourself be deceived is never an option. And that's so brilliant because then you just know what it's all about. It's not always easy. But you know what it's about and you stay true to your truth, even if you sometimes feel like the only one for miles around. If you feel like you're all alone in the dark, then the reason for that might be that you're a lighthouse. Then put all your strength into your shining. Let's come to the star seeds, also called star seeds. Star seeds are, simply put, souls who have rarely or never incarnated on Earth before, and are doing so now, who are therefore incarnated here now. Especially in the current times, they bring, for example, the knowledge and many codings, many energy packages that are needed here to accompany the change. Star seeds, for example, anchor ascension energies, spread knowledge. They generally raise the vibration in the small and in the large field. We often recognize star seeds by the fact that after contact with them, things are somehow lighter, that you somehow feel better, or that you suddenly have clarity, because they have a positive effect in a very subtle way, even if you've apparently only had some mundane conversation. Often you notice after this contact that something is working within you. Something restructures itself, something becomes easier, something becomes clearer. So star seeds often help just through their presence or a few targeted sentences. They push the right little buttons and something switches on inside you. So star seeds are usually truly ascension helpers. And they are also oriented differently because there are so many different planetary systems of origin. Yeah, so some are more technologically oriented, and they also bring a very natural talent for technical things. So they develop new technology, or some even affect the devices with their presence. So maybe you know this, you've already tried everything, and nothing worked on your computer or phone, or anywhere else, and someone else does the same thing just once, and it works. And then you stand there like an idiot because you didn't do anything differently, but you didn't have that presence in that moment. So we clearly also affect devices with our being because everything is energy, everything is vibration. And if someone, for example, is used to operating devices mentally from other planetary systems, which is quite possible, we don't need buttons, yeah? From their perspective, that's completely old-fashioned. Then you can, of course, also operate the devices here mentally. That means people are often not even aware of what they're doing. They don't know themselves why I always get the devices running, or why I always have such good ideas, or why nothing ever breaks for me. They just bring that with them and apply it through their presence, consciously or unconsciously. Yes, and other star seeds, they're more Vedically oriented again because that's how they know it from other planets and have brought it with them in their signature. You know, you can imagine that now if we just scale the whole thing down to 3D, like some have lived in the city their whole lives, so they're used to the city atmosphere, life in the city. And the others, they've always lived in the forest, and the next ones, they've always lived in the desert. And everyone brings their own very unique skills, talents, and experiences. Yes, and so you can just imagine that on a larger scale again with other planets. There are also starseeds who haven't had a manifest body for so long. Since they were incarnated in higher dimensions where that no longer exists, and have now come back to Earth as a helper soul, for example. And with them, it's often the case that they have some kind of difficulties with the body, so they don't get along with it so well. If they know it from other dimensions, for example, acting without a body, then they sometimes don't quite internalize here that this trinity of body, soul, and spirit must be lived in order to truly be effective. Because otherwise the body, as the most coarse material part of this trinity, reports problems. Often in the context of so-called illnesses or simply that they are not well grounded. So they don't really bring their spiritual potential down to earth because they themselves aren't really present. And there is this earthly challenge that we as beings between heaven and earth must be perfectly centered to really unfold all this power that we have, to also be able to manifest. If we are now far too much upward oriented, then we serve the upper fields much more. So the upper chakras, the spiritual, and then we don't really bring the manifestation of what's desired down to earth very well, because that happens through the lower chakras and fields. And if those aren't properly served, then it often just stays stuck in the spiritual realm. And that would, of course, probably make a starseed quite dissatisfied and drive them internally because they feel they can't fulfill their mission. So that what they incarnated here for hasn't yet come into manifestation. And the solution isn't to just keep running in a driven way, as many unfortunately do, because they haven't learned that the solution is always within, but the solution is to turn your gaze, to turn inward and not outward, and to become aware of the inner purpose, the guidance, and the eternal communication with our soul, and then to surrender completely to this inner guidance once again. And that's how the right steps start happening again. Then you get back on the main road, you get out of the side alleys where you got lost, and on the main road you have a tailwind again. Everything is easier there, and it's also clearer to see what needs to be done. Yes, these starseeds often have the experience here on Earth that they don't really arrive or fit in with the Earth souls in the social sphere, that is in cliques, in alliances, in clubs, in villages, in school, with colleagues, wherever. They just notice it doesn't work as easily as it does for the others. And they don't really fit in, they can't really be accepted, but they also can't really join in themselves. So they notice themselves that they are different somehow, and the others, they notice it too. Yes, and theoretically, that's not a hindrance at all. On the contrary, it's beautiful, it's an adventure, it's lively to surround yourself with people or souls who are different and bring new things and can maybe wake you up here and there. But at least now, in this day and age, the Earth souls often just take the easier path because there are enough of them and they like being in groups. And so they prefer to associate with those who are just like them. And nothing strange interferes. You don't have to try so hard and you don't get triggered in that way or whatever. You can still understand one another, that is, the starseeds and the earth souls, but there's always this subtle, almost unnoticeable feeling where you just sense, okay, you're not really one of us, so to speak. And it's actually mostly in lower vibrations, like in 3D or 4D, which I've often discussed elsewhere, where we still make these distinctions, much like how we have locals and foreigners here on Earth. And you can imagine it similarly on a larger scale, simply with the Earth souls and the star souls. You just notice that it's different. And because of that, starseeds are often on their own. They're rarely found in large groups, preferring smaller, more select company, which often results in a much higher quality of interaction. That's important to note because they can truly engage with one another on a much deeper level. Their conversations are usually about personal growth, about the development of the soul, and not so much about superficial things. Of course, it also depends on age, stage of development, soul mission, and so on, but you could certainly identify a subtle difference there. A very important question: do starseeds have to be incarnated to have an impact here? Well, in my experience and from my perception, it's currently not possible for starseeds to truly have an effect here without incarnating. Of course, they can also work from the subtle realms, from the spiritual level, by guiding and advising those who are incarnated here, thus acting indirectly through them if they choose not to incarnate themselves, and that's how they operate from the spiritual planes. Through people who then ideally implement what's intended and bring it into the world, receiving support, inspiration, and so on from them. But if they really want to make a difference themselves, to manifest something here, then they must incarnate and take on a human form. In rare cases, a walk-in is also possible, which is like a shortcut to incarnation. There's also a separate podcast episode about that. In a certain way, it's like the soul carefully weighs what makes more sense now. Incarnation from the very beginning, the walk-in, or simply spiritual guidance without incarnating. And it works because starseeds usually have a very, very powerful energy, which can to some extent naturally be dampened by such an incarnation in a physical body, at least for a while. But then nothing can be directly manifested. That is important to understand. The effectiveness then happens through an incarnated human who is supported and guided by them. This can, in turn, naturally be the twin soul, so that one simply incarnates, one remains in the spiritual, and then they do it together. There are also other options, but that would all lead too far. I want to stick to the core. The most active support at the moment, as I was told, is currently coming from Sirius, the Pleiades, Arcturus, Orion, and at least in part still from Aldebaran. Of course, there are many more highly developed star nations, but not all of them act so intensely or even influence the Earth at all. And with these systems, there is a certain kinship that then also extends to specific parts of the Earth. So the Earth grid lines, the ley lines, so to speak, the connecting lines that also link power places and so on with each other, they also extend into the interior of the Earth and far out through the entire universe. And through that, we are also connected to other planets. And these connection points, that's what I was talking about earlier, what you can then feel there, for example, in a certain country, that you feel more at home there because the energy is connected there, for example, with the home planet. Now we come to the Earth souls, so home planet Earth. On the surface, everyone first believes that it's just like that here. When we are incarnated here, then this is our home planet, but from a higher perspective, that's not the case at all. Of course, it could also be that you've already gone through many cycles here on Earth, even such ascension cycles. The Earth has already gone through that a few times. Whether Earth is your home planet or not, you could have been incarnated here many times and yes, be very familiar with all the conditions. Earth souls often remember Lemuria and or Atlantis very intensely and are also very interested in them, feeling very much in resonance with all of these ancient people, just as well as ancient high cultures. And likewise, the Vedic information, such as, for instance, the Anastasia books, also the Anastasia family homesteads, the Indian Vedas, the Sanskrit scriptures, Vedic life in all its forms. So, depending on the background, it can be more Asian influenced again, which is often the case with the whole yoga scene and so on. Or it can be more generally oriented towards Vedic life. These are then more the kind of people who want to live in communities, who inhabit the Anastasia family homesteads, or even live in caves. For example, on the Canary Island of La Palma, there are a few dropouts, who just opted out of the system and said, "We live here and really close to Mother Earth." But even on a smaller scale, everywhere you see people who simply live self-sufficiently and try to really get back to their roots again. Yes, gardening, walking barefoot, ice bathing. So everything that the earth has to offer us here is lived and tried out with pleasure and intensity, with all the elements and all of nature and the seasons and everything. Younger earth souls are usually not so interested in the spiritual, but they first arrive here fully in the earthly realm, meaning in the body, in sports, in the so-called outside world. And the spiritual dimension that usually only comes along later. Yes, and now we had this division in quotation marks, which I do not want to make. And that is why I am telling you, add a pinch of eternity to it. And everything mixes together once more. Yes, because quite honestly, for some, the realization of where they come from and what they might bring with them now is important. And for others, it is not. And both are equally valid. Because we haven't just been here since yesterday. And if you were to see everything we have already experienced in fast forward, then we would probably, about these trivialities we are dissecting here, laugh ourselves silly. So let me mention one more mix of the star seeds who have incarnated for a very long time and very often, and are also at home here. They know everything well, were present in Lemuria, for example, in Atlantis, but they have also experienced several other often higher vibrating planets and worlds. And they currently make up, so I have been told, a very large part of conscious humanity. So right now, very, very, very many souls are incarnated here, who have often been on Earth but are actually star seeds. And yes, I've included a beautiful quote here. God has known every human soul from eternity, with all the secrets of its being and every ripple of its life, by Edith Stein. So when we look at that now, the question naturally arises, do extraterrestrials exist? And you see, if we take the higher perspective, what else is there to say about it? Yes and no. It always depends on the level from which you view it. So from this higher view I've been talking about, extraterrestrials don't exist because we are all eternal consciousness. We are children of the entire universe. We are souls currently having experiences somewhere in this vast, gigantic universe. So, accordingly, there are only souls currently incarnated on Earth and souls that are currently traveling elsewhere. And they might have human-like bodies, or perhaps bodies that, viewed superficially, would look more alien to us. But that doesn't affect the essence that is inside the body. In that, we are all the same. It's only about the body currently being inhabited. So anyone still very stuck in 3D might not be able to understand this so well. Because in 3D it's simply reality, and thus not wrong that we are, of course, visited by UFOs and so-called aliens. And if they look different from us and you still have a body-bound consciousness, then you say, those are aliens, we are humans. It's understandable from that lower perspective. But anyone who has freed themselves from the dependence on and identification with this body and personality knows exactly that. To put it bluntly, these are just costumes. And how? Yes, and that we are all woven from the same fabric that the entire universe is made of. From love. And anyway, I really hope very much that I could give you a bit of clarity today with this podcast. And if so, I'd be very happy if you share it, because this is truly a crazy and exciting time we're living through with all this information. Because here too always, through the effort to find definitions, to find explanations, at the same time, a kind of separation occurs again. And maybe you've noticed, if you've followed my podcast for a while, that I'm always in favor of being able to differentiate, to look clearly, not to dilute, but always to view everything again with that higher perspective from a place of unity. Because yes, we've incarnated here to have various experiences and to be able to differentiate. That's important. There are differences. But we shouldn't judge and we shouldn't separate, because we can't really separate anything. When we separate, it always affects ourselves, and we always split off a part of ourselves that then seeks unity again. And once we've understood that, then we're always striving for the greatest possible unity. Know that exactly as you truly are, you are intended by existence. You've come here for exactly that. There's nothing more important for you than to be completely you. Turn your gaze inward and open yourself to your essence. I look forward to seeing you. See you soon. Take care. Yours, Sandra.